welcome to the Open Source 101 session. And before going further, let me introduce myself. I'm currently pursuing a bachelor's in computer science and engineering from IEM, and I'm mostly interested in machine learning and scientific computing. I've also been contributing to Python Software Foundation for 𝗢𝗲𝗲, and I've also been selected for GSoC 20. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me in these handles. Now, the question comes is, what is open source, right? So if you ask me, open source is more of an idea in which whatever you're building or whatever you're coding is actually set open to public. Like anyone can come in and actually contribute, or they can modify or make changes to your code, right? So it's basically a software, or in case of software, if you're applying open source for software, it's actually where the code is freely available to use, redistributable, and can be modified easily. Now, the advantages of making a project open source is that everyone is able to provide their own feedback to the particular project that they were trying to work. So there's nothing like you won't be in a situation where you're not sure whether your project is good enough or not, because there will always be people who will be providing feedbacks, right? Now, there's a common confusion between people that when they say free, they think that it's also open source, but that's not true, right? The things which are free but are not open source are known as freeware products. So what they do is they're free of cost, but the source code is not publicly available. Whereas in case of open source, they are free of cost and the source code both are available for free. And one such example of freeware could be Google Meet, right? You can use Google Meet for free, but you don't have access to its source code, right? But in case of, let's say, Chromium, you can use it for free, but you also have access to its source code. Now, the question is, why do I contribute to open source, right? I mean, it doesn't pay me or anything. So why should I even try working in open source? So the thing is, the best way to learn coding is to read quality code, right? First, you have to write code, obviously, but apart from that, you should also know how to write quality code, right? You just can't write, like, for example, in case of Python, there are what happens is Python has its own sense of style. So let's say if I code Python the way I code C++ or C, the particular line that I'm trying to code will be slower. So if I use Pythonic methods to solve what I'm trying to achieve, then I will have better efficiency. Now, the second thing is that like most of the softwares that you use are open source, right? Like even the internet that you're using, the World Wide Web, was actually open sourced by CERN, and it was initially meant for researchers to communicate among themselves. But now it's open source, and therefore we are able to take advantage of it. Now, the third point is that you get global recognition, right? So for example, let's say you're working for a company or internship, right? No matter how hard you work, you'll still be an employee or an intern for that company. But in case of open source, if you're working hard enough and you are delivering very good quality code, then people will get to know about you, and your code will be publicly available. Therefore, they will be able to assess how good you are actually coding, and that will also help you build your portfolio. Now, the last is it's not about the code, but it's actually about the community, right? Like when I started with open source, I had no idea how to like interact with people, or how do I make sure that I'm able to effectively communicate with the person in front of me. But when I started contributing open source, I was able to understand that there are certain ways that you should communicate with a community, right? And what this basically helps is like when I was contributing for my GSoC, I was able to meet various people, and they were researchers from like Illinois University and many major universities. So I was able to they were able to mentor me during my process, and therefore I was very helpful. Like it was very good for me. Now let's come to the major open source events that happens throughout the year. So first is GSoC, which is Google Summer of Code, and it is held during the summer period, which is from May to July. The next one is Xorg Foundation, which is also known as the 𝗢𝗲𝗲, which is basically the endless vacation of code. It happens throughout the year. The next one is Hacktoberfest. It is presented by, brought to you by DigitalOcean and Dev.to. The next one is Season of KDE, and similarly we have another one only for women, that is 𝗢𝗲𝗲. So if you're interested, you can apply to any of these events, and you will be able to contribute. And they also pay a handsome amount of stipend, so you shouldn't have any problem with it. Now, next question is open source only about software? Well, the answer is no. You can also have open source for hardware as well. Like for example, Arduino, 𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲, and NodeMCU, they're all open source. Now, what do you mean by open source hardware? So, open source hardware is where the schematics of the hardware is freely available. So, if you want, you can build your own Arduino board, and no one will try to sue you for that. Now, I will be playing a simple game here. So, I will basically be showing you a proprietary software, and you have to guess what's the open source alternative to it. So first is Photoshop. So can anyone tell me what's the open source alternative to, oh sorry, it's not Photoshop, it's Premiere, Adobe Premiere. So can anyone tell me the open source alternative to it? Anyone?
Someone wrote Blender in the comment.
Someone wrote?
Blender.
Blender is actually a 3D modeling software. It's not a video editor. Okay, so one good example or one good alternative would be 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗦𝗲. So what it does, it's a video editor which is similar to Premiere, Adobe Premiere Pro. Next one is Photoshop. Any ideas?
So keep your chat open. People are
Yeah, GIMP is the correct answer. Oh, I've already shown it. Wait, just a second. Okay. Next is Chrome. Can someone tell me?
Chromium, you have just told about it in your session.
It's Chromium.
And a fun fact is that Chrome is actually built on top of Chromium.
Oh, nice.
Like the drivers are same.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same. Like it's like Chromium with added Google products is what you get in Chrome. So the next one is Maya, Autodesk Maya.
Blender, right answer is the
Blender is the right answer. Blender is the correct answer.
People are writing Blender in the chat.
Okay. I should have opened my chat on my phone. Wait.
No, it's fine. If someone wants to answer, they can unmute themselves and answer.
This is an interactive place, so you can unmute here. So on next one.
Yeah, the next one is Adobe Illustrator.
Oh, okay.
Someone wrote InSpace, and I think that is the correct answer.
The next one is Windows.
Linux. Obviously.
A fun fact about this particular answer is Linux is not an operating system. It's a kernel. Yeah. The correct answer would be GNU Linux, or also known as New Linux. So basically, New Linux was the first operating system which incorporated Linux as its kernel, right? And whatever OS distributions that you have these days actually use Linux kernel in order to operate as an operating system. That's one. Next we have Autodesk. Any guesses for Autodesk?
Okay, no answers are coming soon for this one. FreeCAD. Someone
Yeah, FreeCAD is the correct answer.
Oh, nice.
Right. Yeah. Next is Play Store.
Okay.
Don't write 9 apps.
I've actually used the application from the alternative.
From?
The alternative, the open source alternative.
Really? Oh, that's nice.
Someone wrote APK Mirror. Anyone call wrote APK Mirror.
APK Mirror is not an open source alternative. It actually pirates apps from No, not provide it. Actually, it provides the APK, but it's not open source.
𝗢𝗻𝗲𝗲 wrote Aptitude.
Aptitude is similar to APK Mirror actually. It's not open source. If I'm not
Grade one answer.
F-Droid, that's the answer there.
F-Droid is the correct answer. So basically, F-Droid is the Play Store for open source apps. So if you visit or if you download F-Droid, you will have access to all the open source apps, all the everything. Yeah. The next one is, I think this will be the hard one, Netflix.
Streamio. Someone wrote Streamio.
Yeah, that's the correct answer. Streamio. So my point is, no matter what problem you're trying to solve, there's always an open source solution for it. And imagine your code being a part of these projects, right? There are thousands of people who are using these products and these softwares. Now imagine a particular feature that we have wrote has been used by many users. So it's a sense of pride as well. So it's always a good idea to contribute to open source, as it's something which gives us the sense of being together and being in a community. Now, we have all been in a situation where we are working on a file and we end up making different versions of it, right? For example, let's say we created a design and then we are very satisfied with it, but then we want to add something extra to it, but we don't want to ruin the original one. So what we do, we end up making multiple files or multiple versions of the same file, right? Now, along with that problem, we also have where we become very curious about a particular design and then we keep adding changes to it, and eventually it messes up, right? So we basically want something so that we can go back in time and undo that particular change, and so that we can get back to normal. Now these problems, let's imagine the same problem with multiple files in multiple folders containing multiple lines of code that have been worked on by thousands of developers worldwide. So manually maintaining so many people working on so many files is impossible. So in order to solve that problem, we have version control systems were added, right? So some of the most popular version control systems are Subversion, Git, and Mercurial. Now among the three, the most important is Git, and it's the most used version control system out there. And what they do is they help us record changes done to files by tracking modifications done to the content of the file. Now, Git is actually free and open source. Now, there's a fun fact about Git is the creator of Git was actually created Git to maintain one of his side projects. So I want you guys to tell me who that person is and what was his side project.
One hint from my side, this side project is one of the best open source products out there. So.
Yeah, I would say that project was one of the reasons why open source was very popular back in the days. Anyone?
I will be very disappointed in few people if they don't answer this. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, people are answering Linus Torvalds.
And what was his side project?
Linux kernel.
Yeah, correct. It was created by Linus Torvalds in 2005 for managing his Linux kernel. Like back in the days, there were no free and open source version control system, and so they had to use BitTracker, which was a proprietary software, and it wasn't scalable. So Linus had issues working with it. So what he did, he ended up creating his own version control system. Right. So now we are able to fix the tracking problem. Now there's another problem we need to think about. Like, for example, there are multiple developers out there working on the same project, right? Now let's say there's a developer who's in India and there's another developer who's in Africa. Now both are working on the same project, but the developer in India has no idea which version of code that the developer in Africa is working on, and vice versa, right? Now let's say there's a new developer who joins into the project. Now he has to make sure that he's actually working on the latest version of the code, right? Or else whatever hard work he's doing and whatever changes he's making will be a waste, because he'll be committing to the old version of the code, right? And let's say if someone proposes some changes, so there has to be a maintainer that needs to review those changes and then let the contributor know that whether his code is correct or not. So in that case, Git hosting services were introduced so that these problems can be solved. So what they do is basically they provide Git hosting. Along with it, they provide additional features to it, right? Now Git is a CLI version, or you could say it's a command line tool, whereas these services, that is GitLab, GitHub, and Bitbucket, provide a GUI interface, and they also add additional features like pull request managers or bug trackers. Now GitHub is the most popular among all the Git hosting services, and it was founded by these four gentlemen. Now GitHub was founded in 2008, right? And GitHub also provides additional features like bug tracking, pull request managing, organizations, wiki, DevOps integration APIs, GitHub Actions, and many more. Now and I would like to ask you guys, which company eventually acquires Git? Can someone tell me? It's a very huge company, like it's a well-known company.
People answered Microsoft.
Yeah, that's correct. GitHub is
Fun fact, Microsoft also owns NPM now. So it's like a major part of development is under the control of Microsoft.
Yeah. So now I would like to tell you the basic structure of an open source project, because I've been receiving a lot of messages by other open source aspirants that they're not able to understand the huge structure of an open source project. Like it's too overwhelming for them. So I decided to add this section where I would explain how an open source project actually works. So the first thing that we have is the code base, right? Now the code base contains can be divided into several other subdivisions. The first is the main project code, which is actually the code which will be contributing to the library or the framework that is being developed on, right? The second is the documentation. The documentation basically contains the code that is needed by the user or another contributor to understand what the main project code does. Okay, this can also contain tutorials, like user-friendly tutorials and things like that. And apart from these two, there are also automated tests written for the main project code. Now, as you can understand that there are multiple people working on the same code, right? Therefore, it's not possible for one single person to sit down and test all the changes that are being done. So for that, automated tests are written for it. And there are also various frameworks available for different languages and libraries. Now, apart from these, there are also other supporting files and folders, which helps with the DevOps part of the project, or you can say the deployment part. So I did not go very deep into the DevOps in this session because it will be handled by 𝗢𝗲 later on in his own DevOps session. So I'm not going to be I will not be going deep into it. Now, apart from the code base, we have an issue tracker. Now, this is the place where developers are usually tracking bugs, right? So let's say I'm working on a feature and I found a bug, right? But I'm not sure how to solve it. So what I do is I list that bug on that issue tracker. So if there's someone else who is free or knows how to solve that bug, he or she can straight away go ahead and solve that bug. Now, they're also used as to-do lists for developers. So for example, let's say I'm building a new feature, but for that feature, I need another feature that needs to be developed. So instead of, and let's say I don't have time to do that, right? So what I do is I let other developers know in the issue tracker that to build this project, I need this particular feature, so that other developers who are currently free might work on it. And also this can also be used by users so that they can report bugs.
Soham, sorry about interrupting you, but as for the nature of we are getting into chat, it's better if we can start with GitHub and explain how things work, and then you can actually show the structure to them instead of walking through without a base of Git and GitHub.
No, I will actually show that after I finish this particular section. So I will give you an example.
It's better if we begin with the hands-on first and on the go you explain with reference to the slides.
Okay, so in the case of structure, let me go to the repository which actually I was contributing to for my GSoC. So if I go here, you can see this is the entire code base, right? There are thousands of lines of code. So it's very overwhelming for a new user to understand what is going on. So as I told you, the basic structure, you can see this is the actual code base. If I go to this folder, you can see this is the code base. This is the actual code that is written for that particular framework, right? Now if I go back, you can see there's another folder called docs. This is nothing but the documentation part. So if I go in this folder, this is nothing but the the code that is required to generate documentation, as you can see, right? Now if I go back again, you can see there will be another folder called tests. Yeah, it's actually inside Fury. Here you can see there's another folder called tests, right? So here all the tests are written for that particular code. Now there may be cases where these particular sections are not there. For example, if I go to Django actually has its own sophisticated issue tracker. Therefore, if you visit Django, you won't find an issues tab here. Whereas in other projects, you will find an extra tab called issues, right? And another reason where you could have a different set of also in this case, you can see that we have a particular folder which will contain the main code, as you can see. And along with that, you will have another folder for documentation and also for tests, as you can see here. Now, another reason why you could have different set of different structure is when the project is actually saved in some other hosting service, right? For example, in case of VTK, you can see that it's written here, it's a mirror of the actual repository, which is in GitLab. So if I click on GitLab, you can see the actual code base is here and not in GitHub. So these are the few cases where the basic structure may not be followed, right? So that we have to keep in mind. So that is basically what I'm trying to say when I'm saying about the basic structure. Right, so this is basically the part, and the pull request is where contributors can actually send in changes and propose changes to the code base, and the maintainers or the reviewers can then review them and then let you know whether it's correct or not. Now, I would like to define some of the terminologies about version control, so that and I will also be using them in my future sessions. So first is, what is a repository? Now the location or the remote URL at which you will be finding the code is called the repository of that code base. Next is fork. What is fork? Fork is basically a copy that you create for yourself or the main code base where you will be working on. Don't worry if you don't understand these terms right now. I will be showing you properly how to do it. Next is branch. Branching is basically where you create a parallel copy of the main code base and you add features to that particular copy instead of creating instead of adding changes to the main branch. Now stage or staging basically means whatever changes you have done, they will be focused on, right? And whatever commands you further add or execute will be applied to those particular changes only, or you could say in the stage changes only. Now commit is where you save those stage modifications, right? So let's say you changed a particular file and now you're happy with whatever you have done to it and you want to save it. So what you do, you commit that particular file. Now once you are done with all the changes, what you do, you upload those changes, and the command to do that is called push, or the term by which you refer to that is called pushing or push. Now upstream is a pointer which points to the original repository, right? Means the repository that we have here, right? So we don't refer to the local code, but we actually refer to the remote code or the original code base. Now remote is the pointer which points to the online repos, right? For example, if I for example, you have the original repository and you have your own fork. Now both of them are saved on GitHub, right? So what you do is you create remote pointers, one for repository and another for your own fork. And finally, when you are let's say when you have to update a particular fork, what you have to do is you have to download changes from the repository. So that particular term is called pulling. Now this is a typical Git or GitHub workflow. So I will show you a demonstration of how you could do this along with this particular section. So for this particular session, I've created, I've created a specific repository on our official GitHub organization. So what you have to do is first you need to fork this particular what do you call this, a repository, right? So what you do, you first click on fork. Now, if you're not part of any organization, it will directly go to that particular forking stage. But as I'm part of multiple organizations, I have to select my profile. Now, once I'm done with selecting the profile, it will start forking. Now, as you can see, I have my own version of the actual code base. As you can see, it says my username, the name of the project, and it says that it was forked from the original project whose name is 𝗢𝗲𝗲 Open Source 101. Now what I'm supposed to do is I have to click on this button and I have to copy this particular URL. You can click on this button to copy it in a single click. Now what you have to do is you have to open your Git bash, or in case if you are using a Mac or a Linux, you will already have Git installed, right? So in order to check whether you have Git installed, you have to do is git version, and if it doesn't give an error, it means that your Git has successfully been installed. Now the first thing you have to do is you have to copy the remote repository into your local hard drive or in your local storage. So in order to do that, you have to give the following command, and that is git clone and then the URL that you just copied. Now once you hit enter, it will start copying those changes back into your local repository. So if I do ls, you can see there's a folder named open source, right? So what I do is I change my directory into open source folder. So now if I check the contents of the folder, you can see I have these two files, the contribute.md and the readme.md, which you can see here. Now what I will do is I will open a code editor. Okay, you can use any editor you want. You can even use Notepad if you want to. So I will open my code editor, or VS Code in my case, in this particular folder. So once I do that, my VS Code opens up. And as you can see, here are the two files. Now, if I go back to those to that repo, you can see that So if I go back to that particular repo, you can see there was an issue here, right? So there's an issue called add names with h3 tag, right? So I click on it, and then I ask the user that whether I can work on it, right? So I'm just giving you an example how an interaction between a contributor and a reviewer goes. Like typically, so I say hello and then the username, and I would ask if I can work on this issue. So can I work on this issue? I would add an extra tag so that it's not confusing who's the reviewer and who's the contributor. So I would say POV contributor. So I comment this, right? So now the reviewer gets a notification that someone has commented on this particular issue, right? Now the reviewer agrees with this particular contributor and says that yes, you can go ahead with it. Okay. Right. So now that once that is done, what the reviewer does is it will assign this project to that particular the contributor, right? Now, as it's myself, I would click on assign yourself and it will be assigned to me, right? Now what you have to do is now you have to first see what this particular issue means, right? So this says that in this example issue for beginners, to understand basic GitHub workflow, contributors are supposed to create a pull request with their names added to the contribute.md file with the h3 tag, right? So in this case, I will purposefully not write the h3 tag, and I will actually do a mistake so that I can later show you how you can improve or how you can fix that particular problem. So what I will do is I will write my name, but I won't add the h3 tag as of right now, right? So what I've done is I've written my name and I've also clicked save, right? So this particular file is now saved. Now if I open my terminal and if I type git status, you can see it tells me that one particular file was modified, which is the contribute.md file, which is correct because we added this Soham Biswas or my name into that particular file. So what we do now is we have to stage this particular change. So what we do is we say git add, and then we write the name of that file, which is contribute.md. Right now, if we do git status again, you can see that it says that these changes now. This I see previously it was in red color, but now it's in green, which means that it's being staged right now. So whatever commands that I type right now will be applied to this particular file, or these particular changes basically. So once you have done changing your files, what you can do is, and if you think that you're okay with it, what you have to do is you have to save these changes. To save changes, what you have to do, you have to commit them. So I do git commit, and now you have to add a message to let others know what this change basically does. So I will say I will add a message called I added my name. So when I do this, the changes are saved. So you can see here that the changes were saved. Now what we have to do is I have to push these changes back to my fork, right? So in order to do that, I have to do git push, and when I hit enter, it will ask me for my username and my password. But once you give them the username and password, it will try to upload them back to the online, back to GitHub. Now if I open my fork on GitHub, if I go back to my fork, let me just, here. So if I go back to my fork, you can see that one extra commit was added to the master branch. Right. So, okay, I actually forgot to create a branch. Sorry. But anyways, actually this is not the correct way to do this. I'm sorry. First you need to create a branch. You can do that by using git checkout. And -b basically means that you will be checking out to a newer branch, and if that branch is not present, you have to create that. So what I do is I create a branch called add name. So when I do that, you can see that a new branch was created called add name. Now, if you want to see what branches you have created in your local repo, what you have to do is you have to give a command called git branch. So this will show you what branches you currently have in your system. So right now you can see I have a branch called add name and a branch called master. And here you can see there's an asterisk beside add name, which means that this is my current branch that I'm working on. Now if I go back to my editor, you can see that this particular change is added here, right? So now what I do is I push that branch. Now when I do git push, you can see that will give me an error, and it says that that this particular branch is not present online. Therefore I need to add an extra flag which will set a new branch in the remote, right? So I will simply do that, git push set upstream origin add name. Now if you don't understand what origin means, don't worry, I will also explain that. So I will again give my password, the username and my password. So as you can see, now it has been successfully pushed. And if I go back to my repo, and if I click here, you can see there's a new branch added called add name. And if I switch to that branch, you can see it says that it's a commit ahead of the actual actual repository or the upstream repository. So now what you do is you click on pull request. So you click on pull request, and there will be a different UI here where you can actually create the pull request. Now here you can give it a title. Let's say I added name added to contribute MD. Okay. Now in order to link a particular issue with a pull request, what you have to do, you have to use the hashtag, and then you have to write, or you have to mention the issue. Here you can see the number 2 is the issue which corresponds to the add names with h3 tag issue. So what I do, I click here and it basically links that particular issue with my pull request. So basically I can say that it solves number 2, right? So once I'm done with it, I will simply click on create pull request. Now, as you can see, this pull request was successfully created, right? Now, what the maintainer would do is he will actually check your code. So here, if I click on files changed, he will be able to understand which file was changed and which line was added, right? So as you can see, we deliberately made a mistake of not adding an h3 tag. So what the reviewer will do is first, basically he will mark this particular line and he will say that you haven't added h3 tag, right? And he will start his review. And once he's done with his review, he will click on finish your review and he will be able to review your particular PR. Now, as a user, you will see that this particular someone else would be reviewing your code and he will be adding this particular statement, right? So what you do is you go back to your code here and you add the h3 tags. So once you do that, all you have to do is you have to again check what are the changes, right? So if I do git status, it will tell me that this particular file was modified. So what I do is I do git add and then I name the file. Now, what if you have multiple files that you have changed? So what you can do, you can simply use dot. So what dot does is basically say that whatever changes were done in the current folder, add them or stage them. So once you do that, then you hit git status. You can see that this particular file was added and was staged. Now the next step is to git commit. So I commit the changes, added h3 tag, and I hit enter. So once I've committed, now whatever changes I've committed are actually local, so I need to upload it as well. So I do git push. Yeah, git push. And I have to give my username and then my password. Sorry. Now once I do that, all my changes will be pushed to the remote or the remote repository basically. So if I go back to my pull request, you can see that initially I had this particular commit which was named as I added my name, and then after all this conversation we have another commit called h3 tag. So whenever you have to update your PR, all you have to do is you have to push in that same branch, right? So as long as you are pushing to the same branch, all the changes will be added to it. Now what the reviewer does is he again checks your files and he sees that you have successfully added the h3 tag. So he's happy with your PR, and what he does is he simply clicks on merge pull request and he confirms merge. So after doing that, your code is actually merged into the original code base, right? So now if I go back to the code, which was the original code base, as you can see here, which is part of 𝗙𝗲𝗲, and if I now click on contribute.md, you can see my change was added successfully. And that's how you get your PRs merged. Now this is where, like, I've seen most people face problems in, that is how do I update my local code base, right? If I go back to my changes and wait, so what I do is I switch back to my master branch. Sorry, check out. That's right. So basically what will happen is this will be the condition where your changes won't be updated, right? So what you have to do is you have to do git. You first have to add a remote version, right? Because currently your git has no idea whether where your particular upstream is located. So for that you have to add a remote. So you have to do git remote add the name of the remote that you want to add, let's say 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲 and the URL. So for URL, I will go back to this particular page, and then I'll click on code, and then I'll get the URL. So once I get the URL, I paste it here, then I hit enter. So right now, if I check git remote -v, small v, you can see I have 4 different remote areas. One is the origin. So origin is basically the repo from which you cloned your local changes, right? So as you can see, it's pointing towards my particular file or my particular repository, and the new one that I added, which was 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲, is here as well. So now what I have to do is I have to pull all the changes back from 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲 to my local repository. So what I do is So what I do is first I need to delete my branch, right? Because the add name branch has already been worked on, so I don't need that anymore. So what I do is I say git branch, and then I use the -d flag to delete that particular branch. So once I do that, my branch is deleted successfully, as you can see here. Now once that is done, you have to pull in the changes. So I do is git pull. So and now where do I pull it from? I pull it from 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲. So I do 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲. Now if you are using the git pull command for the first time, you will have a warning message like this. And there are different strategies by which you can actually update code bases. The default value that was used here, which is the merge strategy, is all right. And the other strategies that we have here, they have their own pros and cons. So I will discuss about them in later sessions. So if you do git pull, and you can see that it says so here you can see that it's unpacking objects, and it's been updated successfully, right? So if I go back to my editor and reload this file, you can see
Soham, you didn't mention from where you are pulling. There was an error. Just check the terminal once.
Oh, sorry, correct. Just a second. Yeah. So basically I missed the branch name as well, so you have to add that. So what you do is git pull the name of the remote and the branch name, which is the master branch. So once I do that, you can see it says that this particular file was edited and there were 2 changes added to it, and it says that one file was changed and there was one insertion and one deletion, and you can see that this particular file was now updated successfully. So now if you have to add any more features to it, what you can do is you can create new branch, make changes to it, make a PR, and once that PR gets merged, you can update your current local branch, and that's how you can keep adding changes to a particular project. Now if I go back to my presentation, you can see here what we first did was we forked the project from the master branch and we created a new branch. In our case, it was add name. Here it's feature. Once we did that, we committed changes to it, right? First we added our names. First we added our name, but without the /. tag. Okay. So in other cases, you might have more commits and more different changes out there. Then what you do, you submit a pull request. Then once you submit the pull request, you will have a discussion session with your maintainer or your mentor. Now once you are satisfied, and now both the parties are satisfied with all the changes, what they will do is they will approve those changes, and it will finally be merged to the master branch. So that's how you make a PR and get your PR merged into someone else's repository, right? So that was the hands-on demonstration, and Now let's come to the Hacktoberfest. Now Hacktoberfest is an event in which you have to create four it's basically a month-long celebration of open source software by DigitalOcean, and this year it's been sponsored by Intel and Dev.to. Okay, so this particular session or this particular celebration takes place in October, from 1st October to 31st October. And in order to successfully complete this challenge, what we have to do is make 4 pull requests to any GitHub repository. And for doing that, what you get is a t-shirt and several other stickers and laptop stickers. Right, so it's a really good thing, so you should try it. And now if you have any questions, you can ask me.
So we have a few questions in the chat, and most are around, what is remote, and why are we pushed to remote. And one question that I'll add is, why is it important to create a new branch? Like, I can directly commit in master, the add name thing. Why should you do it directly in the master?
Okay, so if I make changes directly to the master branch, what happens is I don't have a good enough I don't know which particular changes is being added, right? Because there are multiple forks which will have the name master, multiple forks with branches naming master, right? So if let's say if someone is trying to review various other contributors' code, he will be confused that which particular master branch belongs to which particular fork, right? And it's always a good convention to actually name your branches after what feature you're adding. So for example, if I go back to the original repo, you can see here that I merged this pull request number 3 from another user, and the branch name is specified here. Now let's say if I had master here, it would be very unclear that which particular feature I'm trying to add. So that's the reason why we should actually name our branches after the feature or bug fix that we are working on.
Okay, and can you just quickly explain what is the remote all about, and why are we pushing into the remote, and what is it all about in this video?
Okay, so basically there are 2 different versions, right? One is in my laptop, right? So if I clear it out, sorry. So there's two versions of the code, right? One which is in my laptop, and the other which is on GitHub. Right. So the version in my laptop has no idea whether the online version is. Right. So I need to specify the URL to Git that this is where my upstream is and you should upload my code there. Right. So I need to specify that particular variable, let's say, or that particular information.
What do you mean by upstream here? Like, just break down the command for the ones who are seeing.
Okay. So basically what you see here is basically the master branch of your fork, right? Now what is fork? Fork is basically the copy of the original code. Now the original code is referred to as an upstream. Okay, so if I say that my code has been pushed to the upstream, which means I've already pushed my code to the original code base or the original project, right? It's not pushed to my fork, but actually to the actual project. Right. It's basically a convention where you refer the actual project as upstream, because it's not a keyword.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess you should just go through the chats once so that you can answer more targeted questions. Like, there are specific questions that everybody has. Just read the charts once. And then you can give a generic answer so that everybody feels that their question has been answered.
Which particular section I did not get you?
There is something which I have seen, like people are getting confused between branching and forking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So forking is like, for example, in this case, you can see that this is the actual project, right? So let's say if I go back to Django, no, it will actually take a lot of time to fork. Forking is basically like, this is the actual code base, right? This is the actual project which is owned by 𝗢𝗲𝗍𝗻, right? So when I hit fork, what I do is I'm creating a copy of this particular code on my account, right? So if I go back to my fork, you can see that it says that this particular project was forked, or in other words copied from this particular project, right? The original owner of this code was 𝗢𝗲𝗻, but the current page that we're looking at, or the current code that we're looking at, it's owned by 𝗢𝗲𝗲 2018. Okay. And branching is basically a different, like, the term fork is actually specific to GitHub only. Okay, it's not a part of Git, right? Was I clear?
Good. You can just explain with relevance to, what you want to say here is that I'll just explain it again so that others can understand. Once we make a copy of the code base which is existing on the web, that is the fork action, making a copy. And now in your copy, the copy that you have, you are creating another branch which basically specifies another version of the code that you are working with.
Right.
So branch is another version of the code in your existing repo, and fork is basically when you're copying the original code, the place where you're contributing. When you're copying something from there, that is the forking process. Okay. Yes, this might have cleared the difference between branching and forking. Those who have questions, you can just quickly type a yes in the chats. Otherwise, we'll explain it again.
He did something with remote. See, if I don't add.
Also, Soham, if you can just look into the chat, you can see all the questions over there.
Rebase part. Let me just go for. The first question is, what is the difference between git pull and git fetch? Okay, git fetch is when you want to know what changes were made, right? So like you want to know what changes were made, but you don't want to modify the files that you currently have, right? So once you are sure that you want to modify your files, in that case you do git pull. Okay. It's similar to apt. Like if you use Linux, in Linux we have sudo apt get update and sudo apt get upgrade. So update tells you what files are currently outdated, and upgrade actually updates them, right? It's a similar concept.
Can I add one thing about the git branch thing?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to, basically you can say the working of the branch is like this. If we have created a pull request in one branch, okay, and then something that branch or that pull request is being reviewed. So, and if we want to make another contribution or any other changes to that code, so we can create that on another branch, because otherwise if we push that on the similar branch, then that code will be changed on that branch only, and then it will be committed there only with the first one when that is being reviewed.
Yeah, like for different features or different modifications.
Yeah, like adding two features. If we have adding two features and there is one pull request for one feature, and if we want another for second feature, then the branching is used.
Yeah, basically when you want different versions, same file or same project, then you should branch it.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you explain the rebase part again? Rebase is a different concept. I'm actually not willing to explain that in this session. I would do that in a later session. Okay. So I will, if you contact me later on, I can actually tell you that. It's a bit different than that of merge commits. So it's a bit different. How to find out projects in which I can contribute. So for that you have to look into GitHub. You have to search it on your own. It's completely up to you which project you're comfortable with, right? So for example, if you're comfortable with Python, so you have to look for projects which have Python as their main coding language. So you have to see that basically.
See, when you're saying projects, it's basic. It's more like see, Soham has interest in Python and data science. So he was looking for projects in that specific domain. So just a little bit of Google search will be really helpful here. That there are a lot of blogs on all the domains. So Soham wrote a blog about his experience. There are other people who might have written blogs about their experience, right? So just search around the kind of repositories available for your specific domain, because we cannot explain it for each and every one. The basic idea is that first you search for the things which are available or which are actually open source. Like Django is open source and you are someone who's interested in backend development and knows Python, then that is something that you can go for. So first find out what kind of technologies or repositories are open source, and then you can look for your interest. So it's a very personal process. We cannot help you out in that part. We can help you out how to go about it after you choose something of your interest. Okay, so one thing you can do here is you can actually just wrap it up again, like quickly walk through the steps again, what you did, maybe just with 40, just tell them quickly that this is how you could do it.
So like with the terminal commands or without it?
Without the terminal commands, you can just tell them that okay, this you can use your diagram actually. Just give one short.
So basically first you
And maybe yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So basically, first you copy the branch, or you copied the actual code base. So this, let's say this particular line that you see here, this which is the master branch, is the copy of the actual code, right? So now let's say you want to add a new feature. What you do, you create a branch, right? So you see there's a different branch here coming out. Now you add changes. Let's say you add these changes. Once you're satisfied with the changes, you create a pull request. Once you create a pull request, your reviewer will come in contact with you. You will have some discussions with each other. And once both the parties are satisfied with the changes, those changes will finally be added to the master branch. Okay, for the actual code base. And once let's say you want to again make some new changes, what you do is you create another branch from here and you do this entire process again. Right. Is that clear? The original one, or in other words, the upstream one. Like when your PR gets merged, it actually gets merged to the original code base. Like the person who is reviewing your code was part of the original project. So if he merges your PR, he will be merging it in the actual code. Okay. Any other questions?
Also, the entire session is recorded, so whatever he did, the video will be released on YouTube. So you can always refer to that video when you are trying to do it on your own. Okay, and you share the link once it's live. And if you have any other question specific for him, you can just answer it. Otherwise, we'll move on with the a little more interesting part of the session.
What is the use of fork through the entire process? See, if you don't fork the code, you won't have the copy of it, right? Like you just can't directly push the changes to the actual project. You won't have access to it, right? So like I cannot just go ahead and delete someone else's comment. I first need to have access to that person's account, and then only I can do that. So in case of GitHub, what happens is the actual code base is limited to the organization. So only the organization is able to make changes to it. So if I want to make changes to the actual code, I first need to make a copy of it. Once I make the copy, I add changes to that copy, and then I ask the organization that, see, this is the changes that I've added to my copy, and if you think that this is good, you can add it back to your original code, right? Get remote. Okay. See, basically, what we're trying to do is we're taking this particular code, let's say this particular file, right? Let's say this particular file with these 2 lines, right? What we are doing is we are first downloading this into our local laptop, right? First I'm downloading it in my laptop, right? So my laptop now has no idea where this file came from. Okay, he just knows that there's a file here. So I need to tell my laptop that, see, if I say git push, this is the place where you should push it. Okay, I'm basically specifying that this is the place where I should push whatever changes I've made. That's what the remote command does. It basically adds a link or a variable, you can say, which is pointing towards that particular URL or that particular repository or upstream. While you're working on an issue, the code base might change. How do you do that on your local machine? Yes, for that you have to use git pull, which I showed you right now. You first have to do git pull, then the upstream name that you added, for in this case it was 𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲, and then the name of that branch, which is master. And once you hit enter, it will update. Sorry, not this one. Yeah, so if I do this, it will update. So as of now it's already up to date, so it's not adding any changes to it. Can't I clone the original code and do some changes in the new branch and then submit merge request? Actually not, because if you don't, like, it's something which is native to GitHub, right? GitHub will not allow you to directly make changes to the original code. You first need to make a copy of it, add changes to that copy, and then only you can make a pull request. You cannot directly make changes to the original code.
Okay, I guess we have answered most of the questions, and we can now go ahead with the second part of the session.
Okay. So the next part was Hacktoberfest, and the surprise that we were talking about is that 𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲 is actually participating as a maintainer for Hacktoberfest, right? So therefore, we'll be providing various beginner-friendly projects in which our members or even non-members can contribute to it. And we will be having projects in the following domains, which are machine learning, web development, app development, cybersecurity, and competitive coding. So I would like to hand over to who would like to explain their project, or should I explain mine first?
Start with the machine learning first now. Just
Sorry?
quickly walk through, and then the rest can take. You can quickly walk through the machine learning project, and then the rest can take over.
So if you visit this particular URL, which is github.com/dscim, let me just copy this directly.
Vinita put it in the chat. You can go ahead.
So if you come here, you can see this is the GitHub organization for dscim. If you scroll down, you can see there are Hacktoberfest projects for AI, web development, cybersecurity, app development, and competitive coding. Now, for AI, what we have is we have a specific data set which will tell you the details of a forest fire data set. Okay, so if you go into data, you will see that a CSV file called forest fires. So what we have to do is we have to create a model which will predict whether the particular area, like how much area was burned because of that forest fire. So all you have to do is you have to create a model. It has to be in a Jupyter notebook and as a Python script, and you just have to make a pull request with those 2 files. And once you make a PR, we will merge it back into the project. So that's from AI. Now I would like to hand over to whoever wants to go ahead with their project.
I guess Rahul can take over. Rahul, you're there.
Yeah, I'm there. I can just start over now.
Okay,
So Soham, you just stop sharing your screen, and Rahul can do your screen.
Sure. So I guess my screen will be visible now.
Yeah, it's visible. It's loading actually.
Just to move on to that SCIM. This is not the one. Yeah. So this is what Soham said, that we have a number of repositories over here, and for the app development repository, contributing to app development repository, just move on to this one. I have created a good README. You can just go through it. I'll just brief you about README, what it has. So over here, what you need for contribution is that you have to have the Flutter SDK and Android Studio or Visual Studio Code, whatever you want to do it, installed over your PC. So how can you do that? There's the complete installation documentation given over the Flutter.dev, the official Flutter, the official Flutter website. So you can go over there and you can download the Flutter SDK. They have written completely, they have complete description of how you can download and install Flutter over your PC. You have those different options. You can select the one, download the Flutter SDK and update the path, run Flutter Doctor. Okay, so they have this complete setup defined over here. Next, you will, you can, for now, I'd say that don't create the emulator because you can get a problem, you can face problem over that thing. Go with your physical Android device. You just need to connect your USB, means you have to just enable developer options and USB debugging under developer options and connect your PC, mobile with your PC to debug the application. Okay, I'll be taking the Flutter sessions, so even if you don't get the code, don't worry, I'll completely explain you once you get well through it. Okay, so now you have the Flutter SDK and Android Studio installed. So next, what you need to do is that you, as Soham explained, that how can you contribute? You first need to form the repository, clone it, create a branch, okay, and make the necessary changes. I have listed what the changes you have to do. Even in the code, I have the comments over there. So you have to add your data as a member, right? And there will be some parameters that you need to add, like name, your year, your department, your profile path, and so what profile path is, and about me section, your FB URL, your GitHub URL, your LinkedIn URL, and status. Status is just your current status, whatever you have. Okay. So next, next you need to commit the changes the same way Soham explained you. Okay. Make your PR, and finally you will see the screenshot. Means when you have the app running on your physical device, you will see your list tile also appearing here with your photo, your name, and your status. And when you click this thing, you will just move on to so that this is screen where you will have your info. Okay, so how can you do that? I'll show that too. So after you have just cloned the repository and you have on a different branch, then you can open the project. You must have already opened it. Move on to, first of all, since you have to show your profile photo in the application, then you have to add it. So where you can add it, I have mentioned in the README section also that there will be this assets folder, and under assets folder there is profile folder. Right now there is just one image, that's mine, and you have to add your image in this format, like your name.file format. So once you have added it, move on to LIB. I have also mentioned this part in the comments as well as the README. Okay, so you have to move into LIB under data and under all members.dart. Yeah, under all members.dart, I have this comment. You need to create one more member object. Okay, just create one more member object and replace your these details with your one. Okay, like what I said, I've described what these details are. Okay, what name is for, what year is for, and what all these things for. Once you have done with this change, you just need to make the contribution, like push and on, and I'll review it. If it's all fine, then you're successfully merging the changes in the master branch. Okay, so that's it from the app development. I'll now have Anita to explain the development thing. Okay.
Hello, so move on to this. This is
Now
now
your voice is a little low. Just are you using
is it okay now? Is it okay now?
a little louder?
Now is it okay?
That's fine now, yes.
ठीक है now.
So this is the web Hacktoberfest record. You can see, and it's already
This is the screen.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Sure. You have to just head over to GSCIM, go to GitHub and search for GSCIM. You will find the repositories. It's not a big task, and you can also go to the website shared already in the groups. Just go there and you can see the repositories, and all of the team members have taken a lot of initiative in writing a good review. So you will read and you will understand how it's actually working.
Yeah. So is my screen visible now?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So this is the web Hacktoberfest record. Any questions about? And it's already listed. So you can just visit this link, and it's already listed. So this is what you will be contributing to. Basically, when you contribute, you will have your own profile card here with your details definitely. And the review is completely self-explanatory, so I don't think I need to explain each and every step. All of the steps are mentioned here, and also you just need to open one file which is index.html and make the changes here. And like I mentioned everything in the repo. So you just make the changes, and as soon as I merge your changes would be visible here. Like you can see your changes and you can see what you have contributed within a few months after I merged it, obviously. So this is about the Hacktoberfest repo. So this is it. And now I guess Dhruv will tell you about the CC repo.
Hello everyone. I'll brief you. Hi Matt. Hello everyone. I'll brief you about the repository of that is 𝗢𝗲𝗲, you are still presenting. Yes, so now I'll brief you about the GitHub repository of our CC channel. Wait a minute. Yes, so yes, so if you go to the DSC organization, you will find the GitHub GSoC repository here. It is of the name 𝗢𝗲𝗲_Hacktoberfest. So if you go to the repository, I've added 8 questions over here. These questions are from various platforms that you basically practice coding on. So there are some prerequisites that you must have your handles ready, and you must make accounts from the platforms HackerRank, CodeChef, CodeForces. And I'll also suggest that you have an account of on GHG, which is a must for every college student that is pursuing any technical field, IT or CSE. First of all, you need to fill this sheet that I pasted a link over here, where if you open this link, there will be where you need to feed in your name, your year, HackerRank handle, CodeForces handle, CodeChef handle, and your GFT handle. So if you are on the channel of CC, there is a prerequisite that you must have accounts on at least on these handles. Further details about the handles and prerequisites of our channel will be mentioned in our first intro session that we'll conduct shortly. So there are 8 problems over here. So if you go in every problems, there is a description, and also the link is added on the repository. So if you go to the link, you will be navigated to the respective problems.
So this is a code forces problem. The problems are very easy. Basically, these are 2 or 3 are array problems, and the rest are, I guess, maths problems. So anyone with anyone who can dig up a little on the question of maths and array can contribute over here. Also, you can contribute in any language, that is C++, Java, Python, JavaScript. And if you face any difficulty, you can contact us over Discord and in the CC channel. We'll always be checking it over there. So, yes, this was about the CC repo of 𝗢𝗲𝗲. I guess Divya will take over from here about the cybersecurity repo.
Hello everyone, this is 𝗢𝗲𝗲, your cybersecurity lead for the season. So basically, I don't think that there are many people who are interested in cybersecurity right now, but this is the first interaction we will have with cybersecurity, so I would like all of you to check the cybersecurity Hacktoberfest repo. I hope my screen is visible right now.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, okay. So for the cybersecurity Hacktoberfest repo, you can go to the 𝗢𝗲𝗲 GitHub page and you can go to 𝗢𝗲𝗲 page and you will find this repo that says 𝗢𝗲 Hacktoberfest. So 𝗢𝗲, we generally use 𝗢𝗲 for cybersecurity. So that is that. In this repo, like I have given 2 questions, you can say. They are not questions actually, they are actually 2 different projects in which you would get to know about your IP, and the second one is in which you will know about a very basic vulnerability, which it's a very basic vulnerability, yet it's very important in what to say hacking. Like I don't think you all know what hacking is, but the keylogger is a thing that with which the hacking can start. Like for someone to start hacking your system or to hack into your profile, this program can be very useful. So for keylogger, there are 2 programs. One is specific for Linux and one is specific for Windows. The other things are mentioned in the README file. So there is only one contributing guideline that you must follow the steps that the Soham taught you right now. And if you have any problem related to that, you can either drop a message in the cybersecurity channel in the Discord, or you can also personally DM me. The second program is to know your IP. Like we all know what an IP is. We all have heard what an IP is. But what we don't know that IP also has many properties. So in this program, I have divided it into 4 parts. That is classes, subnet mask, network, and host ID. You will get the to-dos here, and in the program also there are several comments that would help you go through the whole program. So just won't go through because the programs are written in C and Python. So I think everyone here knows either C or Python. So it will be easy for any one of you to contribute to this repository.
And I think if you want to use any other language, you can talk to him and he'll help you out. There is no constraint in that.
Like if you want to make the same project in any other language, I can help you with that too. But the algorithm will remain same. Everything will remain same. But just the syntax will change.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's it for the cybersecurity repository.
Yeah, so the main aim of creating these repositories is because when we had started last year, like all of us who were now leading the specific teams, we weren't aware where to contribute and where to not. Okay, so it was a little tedious process for us, but here the main purpose is that you get an idea of where you can contribute and what kind of contributions actually matter. These are very beginner, but if you are someone who has done some work in web development in specific, because we don't really have any other community projects. So I'll just share my screen once. So yeah, this is the website that we had made in January 20, like this January. Okay, so we had actually added a team section and about and an event list as well. This was done by a few people from the members last year. So if you're someone who has a little experience in web development and would like to, add something here, or maybe just beautify this page, for example, because maybe this is like the pictures don't fit well. So if any of you would like to contribute in the website, you can just head over to our repository, and yeah. So where are the links? So you can just head over to the GitHub repo, which is 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲github.io. Here I haven't added a readme yet, but it's like it will be the same process which is there for all the other repositories and the branching, the PRs. It's the same thing. I'll update it as soon as possible. Okay. Now the few changes that the beginners can do here is, I would say, like for the team. This year the team has changed, but we didn't really get time and we also forgot to update the section. So one of you can take the initiative of changing this. And if you're interested, I'll share, you can just, I have opened the issues on GitHub. Okay, let me just show it to you all. Yeah, so on GitHub there are a few issues which are open already. One of the issues is these are from the previous year, like the previous time we had worked on the repository. So it's like we had a few images which were replaced by icons. So you can just, if you are a little experienced, I think you people can try your hands at these issues which are there already. Or you can even suggest adding something which is completely different from the existing website. Like I'd say, yes, yeah. So the 𝗢𝗲𝗲𝗲 has a really impressive landing page. Okay, so they have this animation here, and it's very organized. So if you want to try doing something like this, then you can just DM us on this, message us on Discord, or you can actually work on it and share your work and create a pull request, and the team can review it. So this is your chance to do something if you have a bit of experience, and you can do anything you like, and just make a copy and do the changes. So whoever contributes here or in any of the repo, and the contributions are significant in the sense that they added some more value to the project, or maybe you people contributed in multiple projects, we'll have a certain criteria based on which around 3 to 4 people will be given some stickers or a pop socket from our end. Like we have a few stickers of ML, AI, and I guess GSC stickers and Flutter pop sockets. So maybe 3 or 5 top performers based on the participations we get from your end can be rewarded with some swag, as I mentioned. And the criteria would be that you need to do some significant work. This is something like the work that has been shown by our leads. It's basically something you're doing copy paste. But if you try to do something on your own, like I said, for the website, where you can explore something completely different, or maybe in the app you can add another section which can add value. So that will also be considered as a plus point for you. Otherwise, we are going to have certain criteria because it's not well thought yet. But yeah, the contributors will get an additional benefit because if you complete 4 PRs, you're definitely getting some slides from Hacktoberfest, but you get something from our end too. And just a quick reminder here that the contributions are valid from 1st October. So probably And since we have midterms from, like the second years have midterms from Monday, so I think that whatever contributions you can make after the midterms, and we review it as time passes by. So just be sure that you don't miss the timeline. Don't forget that in October you had to do. And also there is an upper cap, like around, I don't know, some 75,000 people will be getting this, right? So just try to do it early, and maybe try to do this activity in the first 2 weeks of October, so that you still stand a chance to get the benefits of participating in the challenge. That's all from our side. And for those who are asking about the Discord channel, I guess you should have registered on the link that we had shared earlier. So in DSC, I am github.io. Like on this website, we have a button which says join DSC. This is basically a link to the Google form. So if any of you want to join, you can just go onto the website and fill this form, and we'll share this invite link. We don't want to release the links in public because we don't know the kind of people who will be joining in. So that is the reason why. And also we need to maintain a database of our members, so that we are sure that who's the member and who's not. And there are certain events where only the members will receive invites. Okay.